welcome to the August 23rd meeting of the Shade Tree Commission for Radnor. Start with the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Did everybody get a chance to look at the July minutes? They look pretty good to me. Yeah. Okay, all in favor of approving July minutes? Okay, we had tabled the May minutes. I think we're almost ready to do that. The only problem with the May minutes is that it doesn't have our attendance on there. So, I mean, I think it's an important part of the minutes because it shows we have a quorum and what the official quorum was. And also, we're trying to keep track of attendance for ongoing purposes. Steve, I think the notes you got for that meeting, that was the one that wasn't televised. I think that...
Correct, sir.
Somewhere there's an attendance on that.
If we could, sir, then if we make the attendance, if we note the attendance, could you approve it with us inserting
Sure.
the attendance, and then we'll
That's
post
okay
it
with
as
me.
such?
Yeah. Okay, all in favor of approving the May minutes?
Thank you.
Yep.
Jack, before we start, do you want to make an announcement about the 2 vacancies? I know that they're on our list and they were brought up at the last Board of Commissioners meeting.
Well, sure. You can take that if you want.
Okay. So at the last Board of Commissioners meeting on August 14th, they announced that there were 2 vacancies on the board. So if anyone knows people interested in joining the commission, please let them know. Go to the website and there's instructions on how to submit your resume.
Okay. Yes, we encourage the community, everybody listening, to beat the bushes to find qualified, get the pun there, bushes, but look for good qualified people for our Shade Tree Commission.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, if I may.
Sure, you may.
I'd like to introduce Trish Sherwin.
Yes.
She is our interim engineering clerk, and she will be attending Shade Tree along with me, taking minutes. If you folks need anything, please give Trish a call. She's at extension 133. So there's a couple things you'll be seeing. So each month, Trish will include the contractors list. That changes. Some don't renew. Some new people come on. So you'll have that if you should have a question. We're also going to have Mark Dominic's going to supply us monthly with a list of the trees the township removes. They're always hazardous trees, but it'll be the street location, size of tree, type of tree, and the reason that it was removed. And you'll have that to get an idea of what we do internally for trees within the right-of-way on township roads. And the other item was you did get a copy of an ordinance that was supposed to be introduced at the last meeting of the Board of Commissioners on the 14th. That did not occur. A few ordinances were pulled off and will be looked at again. So this is an introduction. I believe it was brought forth by Commissioner Curley in regards to ash trees and basically removing the restrictions of the shade tree ordinance so that people could remove these trees more easily. We all know the issues with ash trees. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, for letting me interject.
Steve, I appreciate you bringing that forward. I've heard the language of that ordinance, and my recommendation to the Shade Tree Commission would be that we revise the language instead of exempting ash trees, that we review. That way, we don't come into a situation where a resident takes down 10 trees, the neighbor comes to us and says, those weren't ash trees, and the trees are already gone before we know what happened. So that way, there's some oversight. John can go out there and review and everything. We're comfortable with what happens. So again,
like a good idea.
It's a quick change from exempt to review.
It doesn't even say that these ash trees had to be infected, or it's like sort of like declaring war on ash trees preemptively almost. I'm not sure why we had to. I'm not sure what the intent of this is in terms of who's getting relief here, as far as you know, Steve, with this.
And again, I think it probably, part of this would be at the introduction to the Board of Commissioners. So I guess I'm early with this since it wasn't introduced and will be.
Right.
But our meeting won't coincide, and I wanted to make sure the Shade Tree Commission had a chance to see it. I met Commissioner Curley with the manager on another issue and said, I'm going to pass this on. He said, fine. So I think that would be best answered when it's introduced at the next meeting. My personal thought on it is it's to give relief to Radnor Township residents that may have diseased ash trees and don't have to, it would relieve them of, if you had if you had 6 diseased ash trees, currently you'd have to come in and either get the permit, a clearing permit, or put in a request to have hazardous trees removed. Or if one of those, if you had a single or more diseased ash trees and one being a heritage tree, it would relieve you of those issues, but you'd be addressing a problem that we all know is here and or forthcoming in the future with the emerald ash borer and the health of ash trees. So I don't mean to speak for Commissioner Curley in any fashion.
Sure.
That's my personal thought of why it's being introduced.
We should probably come to that meeting if we want to.
That would be great,
Yeah,
Mr. Chairman.
I mean, truth be told, there's an effort in the township to identify and map and deal with the ash tree problem. John, these things could sync together. I mean, I would hope that this is all moving in the same direction. The idea that we have a lot of people who probably don't know they have sick trees and they can do something about it. So it's like, it's a twofold problem. You have street trees that are ash, and you have private ash trees on private property. So, but anyway, John, the whole mapping, what you're after is to get in front of it, right? I mean,
Steve, what meeting is this scheduled for now?
It'll be September 11th.
Yes, sir. So again, I haven't seen the agenda. We, staff, make requests for the agenda. My assumption is, since it's Commissioner Curley, that will be on the agenda on September 11th.
Steve, do you think it's a good idea if we write a letter to the full board as a commission and just outlining our thoughts on what we'd like to see in that ordinance?
Mr. Abel, I was going to say that would be, I was going to actually request that if the Shade Tree Committee could, if you want, you could even put some wording together now that Trish could take down, and then she could shoot a draft memo back to you members, say, does this capture what you thought? If it does, we can finalize it, send it to the chairman, he can initial it, and it would be assumed it came from all of you, and I would request it be in the packet. But I think that would be wise in case you folks one or more of you cannot attend on the 11th.
Okay. Is there any, that letter I sent to the commissioners, is there any movement toward forming a committee in the township to deal with the emerald ash borer that you've heard of?
I have not, Mr. Chairman. I have not heard. That doesn't mean it's not happening. I just have not heard. There's, as you know, there's other items in the work regarding, the emerald ash borer and the ash tree, but nothing formalized, and I haven't heard anything from the board.
When you say other things, like?
I know, as Mr. Goles had said, we're looking at,
sure,
trying to get an inventory,
right.
and basically, I'm going to work with John on, and obviously we'll share this with everybody, is a 5-year plan for mapping, treatment, removal, and John's already got some prices on those things. So as we get more of that together, I can put something together. It'll be ready by budget time. When we start to have our budget hearings, obviously it's going to come here for you folks to look to. And if everybody, thinks it's worthwhile, then onward it goes to the board for the budgets.
Another thing about this ordinance is that it doesn't really differentiate, really valuable heritage ash trees that, giant, 80, 90-year-old, 90 feet heritage ash trees, which could be saved no matter what, for the most part, and they could fall right into this, get lopped off, so.
And
that's why I was saying, if we had a committee going in the township to deal with the long-term plan, something like this could go through them too.
Right, and if I'm remiss because I just noticed her in the audience. So the Radnor Conservancy obviously is a big force and has been pushing very hard to get this stuff done. I know they've approached you a few times. We have met with them as staff, and all of this I think is starting to gel as far as coming forth with a budget request
Right.
for the commissioners to opine on and see how and if they wish to fund all these
Right.
various pieces.
Yeah.
Like I say, whether it be a committee, treatment, removal, mapping, inventory, all, none, parts,
Sure.
however.
And treatment and removal would fall in this one, too. Okay. So, I think the best way to do that is for us to have like an email communication and about the things that we think are pertinent to this, and we can sort of put them together, put our heads together, and then send it over to Trish. Is that okay? You could start the ball rolling if you want.
Okay.
Okay, and, you make your comments in terms of what you think needs to be added or to this, and then send it to us, and we can either see if that's inclusive enough or add some other things to it, and in the end, we can get it over to Trish to get a letter before the 11th.
Jake, I'll put an outline together for you, and then we can distribute it throughout to
Okay.
everybody.
All right, thank you. All right, and Jack, one last thing before we start. Going back to tree inventory, Steve, there was a tree that was part of the Wawa sidewalk project over on Morris Road. I think there were 8 or 9 trees on that line. One of the trees died and was removed, and it has not been replaced. Do you know if there's a plan to
It is.
replace that tree?
So the original tree, which was under warranty, died. Staff removed that. The contractor replaced it. The one he replaced it with died. So that was removed, and it will be replaced, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Just one thing about the list that we're getting from Steve, and I really appreciate that we're going to be getting a list of all the street trees removed. So that we have an idea of, what we're losing. And I think you said sometimes there's quite a volume of trees on that.
Mr. Chairman, it can vary. So 1 month it may be 1 or 2.
Right.
Another month, pick a month maybe when the arborist goes through our parks. This year early, we had a considerable amount of trees that had to be removed from Harford Park. They were hazardous and dangerous. As John said, 43, it was at a cost that had to go before the Board of Commissioners to get done. That doesn't happen often. Clem McCrone, prior to construction, we had several trees that had to come down.
Right.
So it really varies, because most of these trees that we find out about are from residents who call us, who live on the property or who live adjacent to the property and are concerned. And really, that's the driver. So there could be times when we get considerable, but I thought this was a way for the Shade Tree Commission to see the magnitude, and it's probably not the month by month, but the aggregate per year of what we take. And you'll note that it's either in a park or on a street, and that also helps you determine or just provides you with information.
Yeah, we had discussed asking for this, but when we had our discussions, we had thought about getting the notification before the trees were removed, because what we find is that people are alarmed by these trees being removed. They don't know that the township's removing them. Even I've done this myself and seen a stump, whoa. And then, I've learned to pretty much recognize that it's a street tree probably removed by the township, but a lot of people don't know, and they don't, it's a mystery, and there's no way to find out. So I would rather even get it ahead of time, if that's possible.
So I'll talk to Mark, because Mark really, and you met him the other meeting. So Mark handles that. And after, working very closely for 5 or 6 years, so it's usually John Hosbach is called in when the report comes in, or sometimes if it's painfully obvious to Mark that the tree is dead or is a true issue, he'll make the call. Sometimes the danger is imminent, and when it's imminent, we try to move that day. But I don't see that it would be a problem if Mark knows that it's Monday and the tree's coming down Thursday, that maybe he couldn't shoot you an email, shoot the
Right, Commissioner.
shade tree committee and just say hazardous tree on, 123
Right.
Smith Road will be removed
Yeah.
Wednesday.
That would be great. And then if it, if you can't, then as soon as possible after, that would be fine.
Great.
But now, we don't automatically replace these trees.
No, this was another thing, I guess it started with Kimberly Donchez when she was with the Radnor Conservancy. She's not now, but she's still a very big part of this. It was the big tree program.
Right.
So we would take our list of properties that we remove trees. The program was, as from the point that I've been here, there was a flyer that was sent out, and the folks that had trees removed were offered a tree. I think it was $35, and it had to be planted in the right-of-way.
Right.
And it was a species of the township's choice. The reason for the buy-in of the $35 was the thought that a free tree, there's no skin in the game, but if you paid $35, we would hope that you would water it and nurture
Right.
it and help it get through.
Right.
So that has been the crux of the big tree program for probably 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
But also, trees in township parks, if we needed trees in parks, some of them could go there, depending
Right.
on how many folks responded. Trees in our business district were
Right.
also another one.
Yeah.
The program was bid, and I sent that to you folks. So there was Bryn Mawr Landscaping got the bid to install 40 trees at various locations throughout the township. The species and type, were provided by John, as well as the planting specs. And Kimberly, John, and Leah McVeigh will be working on that,
Right.
as well as Mark, because he goes out with John and marks these trees and works on that and
Right.
checks with the contractor. And, it's very much a group effort. And like I say, Kimberly's not even with the Conservancy, but she brought this forth years back, and she considers
stuck
it her
with it.
baby,
Yeah.
and she stays with it each year.
So if we had that list, then we could do a sort of comparison about how much canopy we're losing as far as street trees go, as opposed to the trees we're replacing in the big tree fund.
Yeah.
And I think we're probably at a pretty big net loss there. So it would be interesting to just take a look at that, how many street trees we're losing and how many we're getting back through the big tree fund. Okay? All right. Sorry for the delay out there. On to the regular agenda, new business, 303 West Avenue. Please identify yourself and tell us a little about your project and how it relates to trees on the property.
So my name's Brian Ziegenfuss. I'm the homeowner of the property at 303 West Avenue. My wife and I, we purchased it back in June of this year, and we are working on a proposal to put on a 2-story addition to the back of the house, all contained in the back of the house. It's, as we put forth in our plan, we're removing 92 square feet of soil, the contractor that we're working with. There is, as far as the layout of the backyard, there's one tree. There's about, I think it's approximately 80 feet is from the back of the house until the fence. Within about 10 feet of that, there's a large tree that exists there. Today, we're not, anywhere near, or planning to be anywhere near that tree that exists. I mean, that's the main tree in the back.
Do you have this with you, this
Yeah.
little chart? Okay, do we have our overhead there? Okay,
Yep, that's great.
thank you.
So Brian, that tall tree is some kind of pine, spruce, by the looks of it, I drove by.
Do you have the tree on there? I couldn't find it on there.
It is very tall.
Yeah.
Oh, you would go by there? You went by there? Can you show us where the tree is on the property?
Yep, absolutely. So here's a picture of the tree that this morning, but the tree is right up here.
Uh-huh.
Where about, you know, as I mentioned, it's around 7 to 8 feet away from that fence there.
So where is he
against-
going to bring stuff in on the property?
Oh, so as far as the, you know, the construction, called entrance, so our house, if you're looking at our house, on the right-hand side is a driveway that goes towards the back of the house. It's an asphalt driveway. There's a-
It's shown on here, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's right, it's on the right-hand side. So the driveway, it's 15 feet wide. That's the, in and out of the construction process, construction entrance will exist there. There's a large driveway, asphalt driveway that exists already in the back of the house that's used as a turnaround to get into the garage. And that's where all the construction would be, or the construction process will exist.
Now, what I noticed is a very large magnolia on the left edge of the property. Is that your tree?
Yes, that's our tree.
How close is that going to be to the construction?
It's not anywhere near. So the magnolia tree exists where my finger is. It's the front part. It's still a good 15 to 20 feet away from the front part of the house, which is all the constructions in the
Right.
back part of the house.
So unfortunately, I don't think you're totally familiar with what we have to get here in terms of approving these kind of projects. I'm surprised that somewhere along the way, nobody told you, but when you bring these plans, we have to see the trees on the property. They have to be identified in their location with their size and their species.
Okay.
And in your plan, you need to show tree protection, approved tree protection for them. And it looks like these trees are going to need tree protection because you're going to be doing a lot of work back there. And you think of it, they're far away, but when you get these construction vehicles rolling around in there, and you're doing an addition here, right?
That's right.
So I'm 99% sure that you're going to have tree protection for those trees. And a lot of trees, people don't know this, but a lot of trees, the majority of trees that die from this kind of thing are died from compaction, of driving over the roots will kill a lot of trees. So that's the reason for the tree protection, to keep the construction vehicles from either hitting into them or driving over the root systems.
Got it.
And that's why we need to see the species, the size of the trees, so we know how far out the root system will go, where the tree protection should be. I think if you stick around for the meeting, you'll see that a lot of the plans we get, all this is on there. But we have to see all the trees on the property.
Okay.
Because at first you said there was one tree, but now we find there's another tree, a magnolia. Are there did you see other trees on that property?
No, those are the only two trees I saw, but it's, Brian, it's just hard to see it from the street. It's hard to, and if the plan shows us exactly where things could be staged, which could be issues, and that's why we're saying this. If we have an idea where these trees are,
Okay.
in relation to where the construction is, then we're much more comfortable just saying this looks fine.
I mean, this won't take you long to fix this up, but
Okay.
then you show the tree protection also.
That's right.
And then the tree protection, can you define the tree protection, John? I forget exact, but it has to be the
6-foot-high chain link fence.
6-foot-high chain link fence, right?
Got it. That exists how far out from the
Well, that's where you want to try to plot it based on what the root system is of that tree, or the size of the tree. Obviously, you don't need as much it depends on how close you are to the construction and how big the root system is of the tree.
Okay.
So we take a look at it then we take a look at where you design the tree protection, and based on the species and the size of that tree, we can pretty much tell that's why we asked you where the construction access is, so we can see where so all factors in to where and how much tree protection you need.
Okay.
Brian, do you have an architect for your project?
Yeah, we
Because sometimes your architect can help with getting you with a landscape architect that could draw them into your plans. And then
Okay.
it makes it a lot easier for you to see it as well. And looks like from what you're talking about, that you're going to be okay. We just need to see how that goes.
Got it.
You might be able to adapt it to this plan. You might need something a little more sophisticated. I don't. What do you think? Could-
If I may,
Yeah.
maybe it'd be a good idea if I come out and do a site visit with you, walk you through the process of the tree protection fence,
Okay.
be helpful.
Yeah, yeah, no, that sounds great. And maybe I can walk you through the actual
Absolutely, yep.
survey. Yeah.
That would be great.
All
That's
right,
what we're trying to do, okay.
cool.
Sorry we can't move on this today, but we'll table it, and it won't take you long,
All right,
because you don't have too many problems on this, so it's not a major thing.
all right.
All right, thank you.
Thank
Well,
you.
thank you.
Okay, so we'll table this to next month. By the way, did everybody get, for 539 Woodland, did you get plans for that? I didn't get them. So we don't have any plans for 539 Woodland, which is last
That
on.
539 was last month.
Uh-huh.
There was a no-show for last month,
Uh-oh.
so it was in your packages for last month.
Oh, boy. Anybody have it? Is somebody here from 539 Woodland? So we don't have to worry about it anyway.
And, Mr. Chairman, then we will not put them back on. So they've missed
Okay.
2 meetings, so that, until they come back to us, we're not going to
Okay.
put them back on.
Okay, so if you think of it, then let us know. We try to keep the plans, Trish, for the next month, but we don't keep them forever. So if you make a little note on there, tabled from the previous month, then we know to look for our plans, if we kept them. That'll keep everybody from having to bring in new ones. Okay, 304 Edge Hill.
Good evening, Dave Fiorello from Omni. We're here to present a plan. The owner is constructing a new garage addition to the house and replacing some patio areas. Right now, as shown on the first plan, the lot is located on the corner of Brook Road and Edge Hill. Right now, there's a gravel driveway that comes in off of Edge Hill Road, circles around the front of the house, comes out onto Brook Road, and then there's a paved driveway that goes up to a parking area behind, right next to the building. In that area, there's a gravel patio area, and there's also a patio area around the pool that the owners wish to replace. The second sheet of my plan shows the new construction. The owners are taking advantage of the existing driveway that goes to the back and constructing a new two-car garage at that location, and there's some building improvements at the back of the building. There's a small patio area that is going to be replaced. There's an existing retaining wall around a portion of the back. That retaining wall gets extended, and then there's a driveway apron that gets constructed, shown in this area in gray. There is a little patio connection and a little gazebo area next to the pool, and the existing patio area around the pool is to be replaced. So within this plan, we have our stormwater system designed out in the front yard to take it, to comply with the township stormwater ordinances. We have shown all the trees in the area around here on our erosion sediment control plan. We have our silt fence shown as the X lines in blue, so we have those areas. We have our tree protection fence around the trees in the back, around the trees that are adjacent to the patio. We have our stone construction entrance for vehicles to get around the back to build a retaining wall. So I'm hopefully here that we've addressed all your concerns with the tree protection. We are not removing any trees as part of this, but there are trees in the area that we're providing the protection, and our intent is hopefully we've addressed all your requirements.
Mr. Fiorello, where the retaining wall is being extended, so there's going to be excavation for footings, and then the, I'm assuming, and then the, because you're a 4-foot wall, at least over by the stairs?
Yes, the backyard falls in elevation towards the house, so
So-
that wall goes back there.
Well, I guess my question is, not knowing the true drip line of the tree, but seeing that the retaining wall is going to be extended, I know you have tree protection shown on the one sheet. Will the excavation and/or backfill of the retaining wall, will that take place under the canopy of the tree?
I do not feel that it does. Personally, I have not been out to the site to take a look at. My views from aerial photographs show that the canopy doesn't extend over here. There is an area that's from the original plan. I do have 4-inch dogwood shown to be taken down. I know that doesn't comply with their 6-inch.
Right, we got, thank you.
But we feel with the trees along the back, we're doing our work fairly close to the building, so I feel that whatever work we are doing back there is at a sufficient distance from those trees.
My next question is, again, understanding that the tree canopy, the tree canopy you show is just a symbol on your CAD program, so we don't know how big it is, and it's not, I don't believe it's labeled. So you show tree protection. I don't know if that actually does protect that tree through the canopy. It goes up to the retaining wall. At one point, somebody's going to have to move it to get the wall in. Those are, and I guess what I'm getting at is, if the tree's sufficiently far away and can be protected, great. If it's not, then, maybe the recommendation is, there's root pruning and fertilization.
Well, one of the things Mr. Norsini has notes on our plans that do address that.
Great.
On our plans, we do have a series of tree protection notes. There's, on sheet 1, we have 6 bullet points about the care of existing trees. We do talk about root pruning, talk about the excavation and the fertilizing. So we make it a point to address those as part of our plans.
Yeah, that's very good, but.
But will it happen on this specific tree? That's my concern.
Yeah,
So can
right.
that be pointed out?
Right, we're
Yes,
talking about that
certainly we can.
specific tree, and sometimes, we get into more detail when we see a certain tree might be in need of, to make sure that those remedies are applying to that tree. If you notice down to the right of, you've got all the trees identified by the diameter and the species, which is what we asked for, but up here where a lot of the construction has taken place, we don't have that information. So that's
Yes.
what Mr. Norsini was referring to. We can't even tell, some trees are much more susceptible to that kind of work in that area. We can't tell what kind of tree that is there.
I understand your concern. I have to admit that we did not do the survey. We were given this by the owner.
Yeah, I don't
So,
understand why they put, it's not, the ones where they have the
I
trees
question that
identified are
myself.
great.
And certainly, we can
Yeah.
get that information and identify that on the plan if it works for your arborist, and we can work that out with John.
Yeah, I think we have to see that, because if John, we don't, John, we try not to overschedule him too much, but,
Well, I was on the site today, and my questions are about driveways. So I noticed.
okay, let's just finish with this here to get an understanding. So you are going to get these, so assuming we approve this project tonight, you will revise these plans to get these species and trees identified
You
in
make
this
that a
area?
condition of approval, we will do that.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so there's driveway access to the site
sir.
from Edge Hill and from Brook.
Yes.
So where are you going to take your heaviest equipment? Are you going to take it up the Edge Hill driveway?
Our intent is to bring it up. The Edge Hill driveway is a gravel driveway. The other driveway off of Brook Road is paved. My thought was that would be the most, would be the closest access, would be the most stable access for
Would
construction.
be the Brook
vehicles.
Road
Yes.
driveway? Yeah, the reason I bring this up is there's 2 beautiful sycamores on the Edge Hill driveway.
Yes.
and they are tight on the driveway. So any major heavy truck construction stuff is going to compact those, the roots at least on one side of each of those sycamores. And if you saw these sycamores, I mean, they're definitely heritage.
Can you point them out?
It looks like it's on the
sycamore-
Brook Drive, the paved
The-
driveway.
No,
The-
the
the
Edge
syc-
Hill, it's the Edge Hill driveway on the bottom. Brook is,
Brook is over here, and there are two sycamores on either side, pretty much of the Y. I'm not sure if they're the ones that you are
Yeah,
referring
that's-
to.
all I know is you can drive from the Edge Hill driveway through the site and out onto Brook Road.
Yes, and that
So
is,
so my concern is that the driveway, wherever the Edge Hill driveway is, if you're thinking about bringing anything heavy in there, there's some really large sycamores.
we were not planning on using the Edge Hill driveway.
Okay,
Matt, do you see them on there?
no, I mean,
You don't see them?
There's these trees here that you mentioned that are unlabeled. I'm assuming they're the sycamores that you're talking about. I know we do have a couple sycamores labeled down off of the Brook Road driveway.
well, this is, so there's a driveway on Edge Hill, and then there's a little path that goes through like a marsh area. And right on the driveway on Edge Hill, there's a very large sycamore, like a really large sycamore, like bigger than the ones on the
Well,
Brook
yeah,
Road
so,
side.
you know, these have to be included too in this
Yes,
update.
understood.
Okay. Because this is what the problem now, we don't, you know, we're talking about some really huge heritage trees here. We're not,
And our
we have no
intent
awareness.
was not to use that driveway, mainly basically to avoid any disruption to the front of the house.
Well, you're going to have to, you know, you're going to have to let us know if you change your plan on that. though. So
Understood.
we got this where there's like, you know, sort of a thought we might have to use another source, which would change the whole approval process.
Well,
So-
we do have our construction entrance for our access to the back off of the edge here, but we can note that the Edge Hill driveway is not to be used for
Yes,
construction.
and then if it is, then you would have to let us know.
Yes,
So our inspectors
okay.
can come out and take another look and,
Understood.
I'd like to have John's okay on those two sycamores on the Brook side. They look awfully close. They're 30 inches.
Yeah. Dave, let's plan to
Well, it's a
meet
paved driveway.
and look at the tree
Yeah,
near the
but the
wall, the
trees-
4-foot wall,
We
and
can
also
do
the sycamores. We feel tree protection is needed, then we're gonna,
All right.
This is still.
If that works with the
No?
commission.
Well, they
I'm glad
have
to
the
do
tree
that.
Yep,
protection,
all right.
so they shouldn't drive off the road.
I'd
I mean,
still.
we can't ask for much
Yeah.
more. What more can we ask for?
Yeah. Oh, John's saying he'll go out and ask, look, right?
Oh, go ahead, Mitch.
I did.
So, Mr. Chairman, just for Trish's sake, so you're going to recommend approval based upon a visit by the arborist and the applicant revising his plans to show the tree type and size?
Right.
And whatever else John comes up with, we'll notify the reviewer?
Yes.
And then when Mr. Fiorello submits the revised plan, everything moves through?
Right, is that okay with you, John? Okay. And then the stipulation that the paved driveway be the access, that if there's any change in that we be notified. I don't know how that, we have to get that in a form of a letter, or,
John,
I think if you note it as a condition of approval, we'll make it part of our plan so that
Okay.
when they are reviewed, they'll make sure that those conditions are addressed.
So Matt Prusco, who's going to do the
Okay.
review, will
Yeah.
get the draft minutes, which will show that.
Right.
And he'll know that when this comes in, this needs, what Mr. Fiorello is going to revise the plans with will be on.
okay, all right.
and John, it looks like if they're coming off Brook Road, they may need tree protection on those trees next to the driveway.
The sycamores, the two sycamores are showing tree protection.
Right, but the down on the bottom of the driveway, right on Brook Road.
I think John and I have worked together in the past, and we'll be glad to take his recommendations into account.
Sure.
Okay, so based on those stipulations, all in favor? Right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. .431 Boxwood Road.
I believe this plan was in front of you at a previous meeting. My understanding, although I wasn't here, Brian
We have-
Maxett
we have
from my
no plan.
office was here,
Yeah.
that the plan was approved contingent upon us presenting you with a tree planting plan. Since that time, the plan has come before you. We've made a few minor changes to the plan, so I wanted to walk you through those changes. We did submit a tree planting plan for your review, but I wanted to go over the few changes we made since you last saw this plan.
Okay.
You may remember that there's an existing dwelling on the site. That dwelling's being removed along with the driveway. The house shown on the plan is the same house that was shown on the previous plan. We made some adjustments in the grading. The first floor elevation of the house was raised 2 feet. So that eliminated some of the retaining walls in the front of the house. We also moved the house a little bit closer to the street, but in raising the house, we had to extend the walls behind the house. Now we have 2 tiers of walls instead of 1.
Can you show us those?
We have walls along the back of the house. They're actually 2
Okay.
tiers.
Uh-huh.
So similar to what we had before, keep in mind the elevation was 2 foot lower, the walls were 2 feet less in height, but we did have a lot more cut in the front yard. So the front is raised, the back is raised even higher. The grading in the front has been reduced, but the elevation in the back is higher. The walls are a little bit higher, so in order to avoid the massiveness of one large wall, we have 2 walls, one that's stacked behind the other. Generally, there were the changes. As a result of the grading, we have 1 additional tree that is being removed. The last time, our tree count showed that we had 24 trees being removed. There's an additional tree up in this corner affected by the grading that we added to our count. So in adding that to the count, we included the additional tree requirement in our replacement plan. We came up with a total of 54 replacement trees. So a replacement tree plan was developed to show all the replacement trees. I have to admit that our office did not prepare the plan. We were given the information to present to you tonight, so we would look forward to any comments that you may have that we can, hopefully we've addressed your concerns, but if you do have any additional comments, we can include them and address them also.
So the tree protection is on sheet 4.
That is correct. And the tree protection, again, very similar to what we had the last time. And I believe, my understanding is that the board had reviewed that the last meeting. I don't recall any comments regarding that. I do recall that the comments were to come back with a replacement tree plan, or a tree planting plan.
I don't know if everybody else got to look at the trees, but I know we're having a big problem with pin oaks in that area, right in that area, as a matter of fact. We're losing tons of pin oaks to leaf scorch. So we are.
I notice we have 5 replacement pin oaks on the plan. Does the board have a suggestion for something other than pin oaks?
Well, you have white oaks. We usually suggest swamp white oaks.
So we have white oaks, and you would recommend swamp white oaks?
Well, like I said, you have white oaks. The white oaks are harder to establish, aren't they, John? White oaks are harder to establish, aren't they?
That is correct. The substitute is swamp white oak.
Right. But I'm talking about but he doesn't, I guess, want to do all swamp white oaks for the pin oaks and I haven't even mentioned the white oak problem.
So I would do a change up of overcup oak and willow oak.
I mean, the white oaks are nice, but they're just hard to get started. For some reason, they don't. Now, the sugar maples how do they do in this area, sugar maples?
They're more of a northern species, so
Right.
red maple will do well here. straight variety.
I think we have some red maple already shown on here.
I mean, sugar maple's okay, it's just they're a northern more tree, but, so they might struggle, drought. All the maples are drought susceptible, so. Do you have another maple choice, John? He's already got red maples on here.
I would try hackberry, which is another native. Or some of the new hybrid elms.
Yeah, it's just a recommendation. The pin oaks really are getting decimated.
Okay.
I mean, we're cutting them down.
Well, I can certainly pass your comments on.
Yeah. Tree protection look okay? Go ahead, yeah, I looked at it. Any other questions? Formula's good? All right, well, thank you for coming back.
I guess we have a recommendation for approval with the suggestion of incorporating these comments, or are these comments a requirement to be incorporated?
No, as far as the trees, we're just trying to protect you from losing trees that, you put a lot of good money into putting in, that's all.
So I can go back and let the owner know that the Shade Trees Commission is
Yeah, we're gonna
okay,
vote. We're gonna move.
but you're suggesting a
Yes.
couple changes?
Yes, that's it, yeah, but otherwise, I think we're okay. Everybody okay? All right, all in favor? All right. Yeah, so we've approved it, we're just making those recommendations regarding the selection of the trees.
And I appreciate your comments.
Right.
All right.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now, as far as tree remove without approval, we did have a couple things that should be on the agenda for that, but, we're having a lot of transitions going on, so we didn't get the Overbrook Golf Club and La Maison notified that they should be coming to this meeting. So those two issues will be placed on September's agenda. And Steve, they'll be notified, right?
That's what we're discussing now.
Yes.
We're gonna notify-
And La Maison, just because the one meeting was canceled does not
Right.
give them a free pass for the
Sure,
rest of the meeting.
sure. As far as Ashwood Road, the only thing I'd like to show is, Trish, if possible, that what our resolution was with Ashwood Road, so that issue's closed in terms of it doesn't look like something we never got back to in terms of the agenda. So what happened with Ashwood Road is the contractor did pay the fine.
The contractor paid the fine rather quickly. They were, actually, I was conversing with Trish and
Right.
brought it in by, literally hand-delivered
Yeah.
it, so that was good.
I mean, I did have a feeling with that Ashwood Road thing that there were other trees removed that that I don't know if we got really to the bottom of what other trees removed. I don't think they were heritage trees, but there was more than the heritage tree removed, right?
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I don't recall. I know that was like 2 meetings ago. I do not remember. But the letter was basically drafted by, I gave them all the information, your pictures, and
Sure.
so he based the fine on what he saw through the pictures and on the ordinance, and they did comply.
Right, and are they licensed now? What was the name of that contractor?
I think it may have been Donahue. Yeah.
Are
They followed up on everything on their part.
But are they licensed now?
We will check on that. Trish, if you could make a note to check.
I don't
if
see
they-
them on here. I don't see them on here as licensed. All right, well, something's better than nothing, I guess, but I'm just curious as to what happened there, how many trees were actually removed, and, but this horse is a little bit out of the gate, pretty far out of the gate at this point, so we at least got something, some resolution of it. Okay, so old business. We have a subcommittee progress report. We have a subcommittee Matt and Eileen on to look into a master street plan for Radnor. And can you guys?
Yeah, it's really preliminary, Jack.
Sure.
But, so Eileen and I have met a couple times, and we sort of divvied up things, but what I want to say right at the beginning is it's just not Eileen, it can be more than Eileen and I. It can be, as we get new shade tree members, or if they're present shade tree members who want to help work on this, Eileen's arranged for a subcommittee work meeting on the 20th of September, and it's going to be advertised and it's going to be filmed, so to protect ourselves sunshine law-wise. And so that's just something that's coming up, so, anybody who's in for that. With the way we divided this up was, I just wanted to spend a lot of time driving around Radnor with some former Shade Tree Commission members like John Ward and my wife, and just to take a look at the tree, the health of the tree canopy, mostly just looking at street trees. And I've been doing that, and just to get a sense of it. And that also helped. I started a database on what we might want to think about for recommended trees as we go forward, just because the climate's changing and I'm sure you've noticed that all of a sudden people are growing trees that used to grow in Florida, and they're doing very well here. And it's not probably a great thing, but it's the reality of where we are. And so I've compiled a list based on an old Radnor shade tree list. And John is doing his own list based on his expertise, because he's forgotten more than I'll ever know about this stuff. But John wants to convene a meeting with the Shade Tree Commission members sometime in early September to go over the trees that we've been identifying and get a much clearer idea what we want to say in terms of recommendations. So John's going to schedule that. So that'll be a great meeting. Eileen's been looking at different townships in terms of best practice for shade tree, what their shade tree ordinances say, do, how they behave. And one example that she's told me about that we really haven't gone over it in detail is Swarthmore has a very strict shade tree situation. And they've actually gotten themselves, I think, sometimes in a pickle because their ordinance is so strict. But I think it could be good messaging for us as a unit to just see what some other townships have done. And Jack, you mentioned Upper Merion has some pretty good stuff in their ordinance. So that's another aspect of the subcommittee work group. The one thing that we've talked about, Steve, is that the Shade Tree Commission used to have a checklist, and the checklist used to go to developers, and it used to go to, if a resident was moving in and they were interested, or they thought they were going to come before Shade Tree, they got a checklist. And I found an old checklist. It's pretty good. And it sort of lays out things that it sort of solves problems before they come to us. So
Sure.
When people what do you mean I need to show shade tree protection? Yeah. Well, the checklist says that, and it says
Matt,
a bunch.
sorry, I don't want to interrupt you, but the issue you're reporting on is the master street plan for Radnor.
Right.
And Trish, I don't know what Trish is going to do with what you're saying here, but you're getting into revision of the shade tree ordinance, revision of the tree lists, which some relate to the ordinance, some don't. I don't know what your list is relating to, but we want to keep focus on what the agenda item is. Now, you and Eileen were to form a subcommittee to deal with the specific issue of a master street plan in Radnor.
Right, but that automatically takes you to the recommended tree list issue, because we have to look at what.
Okay, so you're looking at that in terms of. I think what's on the list now is sufficient enough to work on a master street plan. We can always add or subtract trees from what in that plan. For instance, if you want certain trees on Lancaster Avenue or Conestoga Road or whatever, and a tree comes up that's on the new list, we can always substitute there.
Well, here's my issue, Jack, is that the list that Radnor has if you try to find the recommended shade tree list right now, it's a 203 document, 2003 document. That's 14 years old. And I don't know about you, John, but I think we ought to look at the recommended tree list in a fresh way. And if there's some trees that we think should come off, take them off. And if there's some trees that we think we should add them. I mean, I'm not the expert. I'm just saying that this is happening anyway, Jack.
Yeah. Well, Matt,
so-
let me ask you this. How do you define what you and the committee that you two were assigned to, okay? How do you define making up a master street list for Radnor?
What the master list is a list of species of trees.
A tree plan, master tree plan.
Yeah.
A tree plan for...
Which is, all it is what kind of trees do you want? You know, and what do we have? I mean, we're not doing a survey, but, I mean, we could, I guess, do a survey of every tree that...
Well, maybe that's the problem. We formed a committee and we didn't really have a really clear picture of what we wanted this committee to be. We put the cart before the horse.
Well, I think it's a good idea for the Shade Tree Commission to be aggressive about.
I mean, the way I see a master street list is we look at the streets in Radnor and determine, are there appropriate trees on those streets? Are there trees on those streets? Can there be more trees on those streets? What can we put them there? What kind of trees we would put on those streets?
Right, but...
So, I mean, we are working on a street plan for Lancaster Avenue, aren't we, Steve?
Commissioner, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. So you remember the Conservancy has been before you. They've met with us, John Hosbach. So John is actively working on the ability to have an inventory of the trees in our right-of-way.
Right.
So he has a person.
So that's a key point, an inventory of the trees in our right-of-way.
And what we're doing is I'm trying to extract the GIS data to send it to his person, who can do quite a bit from a desktop,
Right.
which is a lot cheaper.
Right.
So my job is to get the GIS data to John's consultant, and then they're going to give us a quote, and then that all goes into this budgetary
Right.
look we're having at inventory of right-of-way, inventory of open space, treatment of trees, removal of trees, pruning of trees. So there's a lot of facets
Right.
to what's all been brought forth, and
Right.
that's what we're working on.
Okay. So as you do that, that inventory, you're doing it street by street, right? I mean, you're taking one street and finishing one street and then going on to another street, right? Or you're not trying to do the whole township at once.
Right now, we are just obtaining the cost to provide the inventory.
So none of these things are funded as of yet. So the purpose of these exercises are to get costs, to put together a plan to present to the Board of Commissioners to try to obtain funding for all these various items. One being street tree inventory of open space. John's got prices for tree removal, for tree treatment.
Right.
But so you don't have the extension. You have a unit price, but no quantity, right?
So let me ask you this, John. How do you see our subcommittee working here to contribute to this process?
I mean, I think Matt is doing a great job. He's going out trying to get a feel for the land, trying to understand what our canopy consists of, our species, what's doing good, what's doing bad. He's trying to wrap his hands around the entire project. Matt knows very well he's not going to be able to perform a total inventory of the property, okay, of the community. He'll be able to take the inventory once it's completed, if approved, and then go through that and start marking it up, giving recommendations. At that point, we'll have our new list, hopefully, in September, and we'll be able to apply that to the inventory.
Right. That's why I was asking, are you kind of doing a certain streets at a time, or are you trying to do the whole thing at once?
The price that we're going to obtain is for the entire community.
Mm-hmm. And that's off-street too, right?
Correct. That'll be your parks, open space, streetscape, and business districts.
Yeah.
Can I add? I think it's important, Matt, that you mentioned that you have a historical perspective on an original list. I think that's very important to be considered at this point while we're working on a fresh look at inventory and then what comes after that. And if we keep working on that, those pieces, then to present to the Board of Commissioners, maybe we can move forward.
Yeah, this is from my perspective, it's just research. It's just free research for for Radnor.
I think it's
And,
I think it's pertinent, though,
Oh, yeah,
too.
I do too.
I'm not trying to force a list on anybody.
No, I think it's pertinent.
No, I'm just trying to define what your subcommittee's doing here is so that we have a clear purpose. And at this point, we're not recommending that Trish try to resolve this into meeting notes for what's going on. It's too wide
That's
range.
not necessary at this point.
Yeah. So don't worry about any of this, try to duplicate any of this. But I still think if there's a purpose for your subcommittee that's defined to move forward, is there or isn't there? If not, we might as well get rid of it. I mean, if it's just you going out and looking at the inventory,
Well, no.
that's not really the master street
So
plan thing.
there's two issues, there's two key dates coming up. The first key date is whoever wants to be on the subcommittee, meet with John when we finalize the recommended tree list, because that's going to happen. That's, as far as I'm concerned, John, that's a reality, right?
Okay.
So that's the first meeting. As soon as John schedules it.
Well, that's a totally separate thing.
No, but it all emanates out of this subcommittee ideas for, like, where do we go? Like, do we want a recommended tree list to be updated since?
Sure, well, you can be a subcommittee of one, or anybody else can be with it to meet with John.
Right, but what okay, so that's the first
Okay, so is there anybody else interested in meeting with John on that?
Well, John wanted the entire group. I mean, he wanted as many voices as possible.
Also, Parks and Rec has also formed a subcommittee to help with the tree list, and Mary Coe is stepped up. Gretchen, can you? Correct. Okay. So
Well, sure,
before
Parks is intimately involved with this thing.
So before we duplicate all of our efforts, we want to work together.
Were you going to have a public meeting to talk about this? What was your September 20th meeting?
That was the subcommittee finally, getting together with all the different aspects of what we've been researching to, like, talk about what we've been finding, and then
That subcommittee doesn't exist, so we have to form a subcommittee here to do.
Well, we
in that sense.
did. We formed the subcommittee 2 months ago because Eileen and I have met.
Your master street plan.
Yeah.
But that's the subject of that. You can't just take that and move that to any subject you want.
Right, but the master tree
It's like
plan.
mission creep.
Right, but the master tree plan would involve, aspects of what kind of trees we have, what the shape of the trees are, best practice in other townships for their master street plans.
Sure.
Yeah, that's all.
Yeah.
We would confine it to
But
that.
the meeting, the 20th, is not that subcommittee.
It is.
Okay.
It is. It most certainly is.
Okay, that's fine.
And that's why we're going to advertise it and we're going
So
to film
that's a
it.
meeting of the subcommittee, and they're getting involved with the approved tree list.
Right.
As that relates to the master street plan.
Right,
right?
and John's meeting will predate that meeting, which syncs it up pretty nicely.
So I'm sorry, just so I have this. So there's going to be,
No, wait, the meeting of the 20th is not of the subcommittee.
Yes, it
Yes, it
is.
is.
Then, the televised one?
Yes.
You don't televise meetings of a subcommittee. If you're televising it, it's because you're having a quorum meeting.
Well, we may.
Well, you can't do it. I don't think you can do just willy-nilly one or the other.
I don't
mean, if you're
understand.
planning on having a televised quorum meeting,
No, if we advertise
that's an
the
official
meeting.
meeting of the Shade Tree Commission.
No, it would be an official meeting of the subcommittee of the Shade Tree Commission, which has
Well,
been approved.
What Mr. Rice recommended is, if it's a subcommittee, it still has to be advertised.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to be televised, it just has to be advertised.
Subcommittee meetings have to be advertised?
Yes, correct, to the public. That is correct.
And you don't need a quorum.
Oh, geez, I didn't know.
Yep, that is correct. It has to be advertised.
You mean all the commissions,
Correct.
any subcommittee?
Starting in 2017, the Board of Commissioners directed everybody that had a subcommittee to have it advertised.
It's a lot of red tape. Okay, so we're talking about advertised, not televised.
Well, yeah, but then we got a notice that they wanted to see it on YouTube. Somebody told Eileen that it would be a good idea to have this thing filmed. and recorded and documented, and I have no problem getting that done myself. I mean, I don't see why the public wouldn't be interested in it, but
And where do you advertise?
On the website.
No, it goes in the paper. There's Delaware Down, there's 2 newspapers that it goes in, and it's a standard format, Radnor Township, yeah.
So the way I got this on email was that you were trying to have a supplemental meeting of the Shade Tree Commission, televised. We're getting willy-nilly here in terms of, and very fuzzy in terms of what we're doing, what our definitions are. And really, this commission work doesn't really lend itself to that kind of thing. So the meeting of the 20th, what is it? Is it a meeting of a subcommittee, or is it a meeting of the Shade Tree Commission?
So if you remember, Jack, 2 months ago, we all okayed the subcommittee being formed, and at that point, it was just Eileen and myself, and it was about the master tree plan.
That is defined. That can't be changed.
And, no.
Okay.
And so that's what the meeting on the 20th is about. It's about the master tree plan. It's just about some research that the 2 members of the subcommittee have done to discover, like, what other townships have done with their master plan.
Okay.
That kind of thing. And,
Okay.
and the only difference now is that I think Eileen's invited other members of the Shade Tree
But
Commission.
you can't have a quorum.
Yes, you can.
No, you can't. You can't have a quorum if it's a subcommittee meeting, because that becomes a formal Shade Tree meeting.
But we're not, like, voting on anything. You know,
Doesn't
it's
matter.
not-
You're deliberating.
We're really not. We're just reporting.
Yes,
like
you
what
are.
we're
You're
finding.
deliberating.
I don't know. I mean,
Steve, I need some clarity here, because.
Yeah, I just talked to Trish, so we'll reach out to the solicitor tomorrow. A lot of questions here that I can't answer in regards to sunshine law. So we all know that a subcommittee meeting has to be advertised. So we're good on that. Whether you're allowed to have a quorum or it cannot be a quorum, that'll be a question that goes to Solicitor Rice first thing in the morning, and that'll get shot out to everybody as soon as we have an answer on that. And that might give you that can help us give us some guidelines.
I'll be hysterical if we have a quorum and we can't have a meeting.
Yeah, I know where you're coming from, but best if we check in on
Don't plan
that.
for a quorum. Don't plan for a quorum.
I just think extra voices are important at this point, because it's really all
Yeah,
about.
extra voices are important, but there's formats in which to put the extra voices appropriately in, and there's formats that you don't put them
But
in.
it's a subcommittee meeting. It's not, we're not making rulings. We're not creating a new
Yeah,
ordinance.
I know what your thoughts are and your feelings are. I share some of those thoughts and feelings. I'm trying to give you what the regulations are not. I didn't write the regulations for the sunshine law.
Mr. Chairman, Jack.
Yeah.
I think we're getting away from what we're trying to do here in terms of trees and conservancy and township. We're going to look to Steve, is this okay? Look to Steve to answer these questions for us on the format. The goal is to move forward on getting a master list, whatever that is, how we can best save, replace, move forward. And so I think that we're getting caught up on semantics.
I'll ask Solicitor Rice for a whole rundown on the whys and wherefores of subcommittees. And hopefully I'll be able to I'll shoot that out to everybody, and we'll answer everybody's questions as far as that is.
The only thing, I'm not trying to belabor it, I'm just trying to get clarity, which is it's going to be hard for Solicitor Rice to do an either-or thing. I'm pretty sure that can it be I guess you'll make that part of your question. Can you plan a meeting that might be a subcommittee meeting or might be a full Shade Tree meeting? I know that quorum issue is important for
there's a
meetings
couple
outside the normal meeting routine.
There's a couple of things. So there can be a casual meeting of the members of the Shade Tree Commission. I know I've discussed that with him. It's not a subcommittee. It's not advertised. It's
Right.
Folks getting together over a cup of coffee at Starbucks to discuss things.
Which I mentioned before. If people want to share ideas, that's always available.
The subcommittee does have to be advertised. We'll find out about the composition. Does it matter if it's a quorum or not a quorum? And so right now, once this gets in, we'll have to set up the advertising, and while the room is still open for the 20th, just so folks know, the second floor administration area is now set up to televise
Good.
meetings with recording capabilities, so they get recorded. They're not put live, they're not out live, and then the next day they get put out on YouTube. So it's not a live recording, but it is memorialized, and our residents can reach out the next day and view it. But I'll get those questions answered.
Jake, would you like to be part of that subcommittee? I had heard that you might want to be part of that master plan subcommittee.
Yeah, I've expressed interest,
Right.
and, I mean, the meeting times are just based on availability, but, I'll work with Matt and Eileen on that.
Well, we can vote to put you on that subcommittee tonight.
Oh, okay.
Okay, now, we have a quorum here, so we can put you on the subcommittee, then you'll have a 3, then you'll have another voice in there. All right, so all in favor of Jake being on that subcommittee? Aye.
I also had said that I would help Eileen, but I'm wearing 2 hats, Parks and Rec hat
Sure.
and Shade Tree hat.
Yeah.
So I don't necessarily need to be officially on a subcommittee.
I'm sorry, I didn't want to...
Please, no problem.
Okay.
But I
didn't know you were interested, I know Jake was.
am working with Mary as well.
Sure.
So I'm between all of these committees.
Right.
Whatever is appropriate
Right.
is.
Okay, so Jake is now on your subcommittee.
So the master...
So the
street
minutes
tree-
can show that.
The Master Street Tree Plan Subcommittee is Matt Golish, Jake Abel, and Eileen Brett.
Right.
Thank you.
Trish, are you okay on this now as far as what to put in and what not to put in? It's a little confusing. Okay. So Steve, how are we going to communicate all of this now? Just by email before the 20th?
Right, so I'll speak to Solicitor Rice. He has hours in the Township building on Thursdays.
Right.
I'll go up and talk to him. What comes out of that, we'll shoot out to the Shade Tree Committee, as well as John, Trish, myself.
Okay.
And probably copy John, that way if there's a question, he'll...
Okay. And, like I say, try to, make sure there's some arrow pointed in your deliberations toward this main goal of the master street plan for Radnor. So we can kind of keep things compartmentalized somewhat in terms of the things we're trying to do. Okay? So we're not revising the shade tree ordinance in this. I mean, we can look into other ordinances or how our ordinance is working in terms of the I don't really see there's much connection between the ordinance and the master shade tree plan. So try to stay focused on that. Okay?
But Jack, just to clarify, looking at the ordinance should be a priority that we need to address at some point.
We've talked about that.
Right. So.
Yeah, we have talked about that. Yeah.
I just think maybe maybe not tonight, but we think about putting a plan together for that action as well.
Sure. We're going to have to get the bamboo. Now, on the bamboo ordinance, now that we have a secretary, we did have a subcommittee that met on the bamboo ordinance, and what we decided was to incorporate the prohibition of planting bamboo, period, from the Haverford, similar language from the Haverford ordinance into this ordinance. Because the ordinance, the sample ordinance or the proposed ordinance has so many rules and regulations about planting bamboo. I don't want to go into detail, but there's so many that it would be impossible to enforce with our current enforcement people. And we just felt that it's better just to have a prohibition on planting bamboo. So I will get together with Trish to basically cut and paste from the Haverford bamboo ordinance to into our ordinance that there is a prohibition of planting new bamboo in Radnor. And then we can forward that, then we can send that proposed ordinance as revised to the commission for consideration. And once we get that done, which has been all business for quite a while, then we can, now that we have a secretary to help us in terms of having an editable copy of our regular ordinance, we can plan to go to work on ideas for revising our shade tree ordinance. But we want to get that bamboo done, get some things out. The reason I'm trying to get a little defined here, so we can get some things off our agenda and move forward on them. If we're not moving forward on them, we should take them off our agenda. So we get these two things done, and especially the bamboo ordinance, we want to move that forward. The next old business, the Philippone.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, just
Sure.
real quickly. So we talked about this before. The usual method would be we provide the ordinance to the committee, come to the committee, Trish takes notes, and then a red line.
We talking about bamboo here?
Yes.
Yeah.
So the red lined ordinance would come back to you folks, any changes, and then that would be moved forward.
That would be fine.
Do you want that for the September 21st?
Yeah, I can get
meeting?
to Trish to get that red lined and cut,
Okay.
pasted.
So
Yeah.
what you'll get is a copy of the current ordinance. When we meet on the 21st, we'll note what changes you wish to make.
Right.
The following meeting, you will get that red-lined ordinance with all your comments.
Okay.
Thank you.
And Steve, can we get a copy of that a little before the 2 days we get the packet?
Well, that was the other thing. So we're going to, the goal is to get you folks the packet the week before the meeting, right? At least the weekend before the meeting. That's your time. So we didn't get to deliver it as early as we'd like. So our goal for a Wednesday or Thursday meeting is going to be to get it to you the Thursday or Friday before, and that's what will happen for
That
the
works.
next one,
Thank you.
especially when it's going to have an ordinance, some deeper items in it.
And before the meeting was over, I do want to welcome Steve back. As you may have noticed, Steve was gone for about a month and a half, and I know I missed him. I'm certainly glad to have him back to
Thank
guide
you.
us with his tremendous knowledge of what's going on in the township and the shade tree and
Very
all
nice of you. It's good to be
all
back.
the different commissions. So thanks. Glad to have you back. So we got the Philippone Connor Lamasan tract. Before, we're going to have a little report from our parks rep here, but there was an effort initiated by the Eagle Scouts to do some work in that park area. It was delayed due to weather, and I think we would have benefited from a little more notification, a little more time to get the notification out. So that will be, that work will be done, and it's the Eagle Scouts and any community help they can get to go into that Philippone, Bow Connor, distressed area, vine infestation, we're losing, we've lost over 50% of the trees in that area. So it's a very distressed area. So as soon as the Eagle Scouts get back to me, I forget his name. Justin, yeah. And you put out, Radnor, the Conservancy put out a little flyer on that.
Yeah.
Can you come on up?
It's
Yeah.
something that he designed.
Gretchen, could you come up a second? Yeah. Yeah, the Radnor Conservancy was involved in getting that community help for us.
Yeah.
And I do want to make some.
So he was working with me this summer.
Right.
And he came to me interested in, a service project. So it was a park that he was connected to, so it was important to him. So we were working with him on trying to advertise that.
Yes. So that flyer, you sent that out by email, right? Like-
Email and Facebook.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And so that just to your, you sent it out to the
Yeah,
Radnor Conservancy members?
Right,
or-
the people are from our
And to
database that
certain
we
gov-
have
yeah.
their emails.
And is there any chance you could reissue that
Sure,
flyer?
but he needs to identify a new date.
Right.
So he's working on that with me now.
Yeah,
So he had mentioned the 16th, but I'm not sure.
okay,
So I don't know if that's finalized.
okay. So at that point, we're just letting the word out to the community that, the community involvement for people to bring loppers or saws and help.
Yeah, I mean, I
This
think
distressed area.
I had gone over there. A number of the vines, and John, I don't know if you've been over there recently at all. A lot of those vines have already been cut. there's a lot of vines that are just kind of, they're like blanketing up the trees. So I don't, I'm not sure what the best practice is. I mean, if the best thing to do is go in there with a mower and mow the stuff down and then
Well, we have some.
spray it. I'm not exactly sure, but
Yeah.
I know Steve's concerned about it's important to use organic products, especially near, or something that's safe near water.
Right.
So I'm not the expert on that, so.
Well,
That would be rodeo.
Yeah, and just so, before, I don't mean to interrupt John, so a few years back, EAC, Board of Health, Park and Rec, and ultimately the Board of Commissioners, so we stopped using glyphosate, which is your Roundup, and your rodeo, which goes by the water. We don't use any of those products anymore. We use natural-based weed killers. They're more expensive to use. Sometimes they, depending on what we can get that particular year, they smell like cloves, they smell like other things. So that's what we use for our weed treatment, along fence lines and beds. And in that one email, that's why I said if we could just be careful, because really right now, I mean, it was decided that we weren't going to do that. So if we were going to use rodeo or Roundup, I think we need to bring it forth. Now, if the stuff, for lack of a better term, the stuff we use, which is all natural, can be used on vines, and I'll defer to John, that would be a good thing.
Well, that was an idea for after we did the cleanup anyway. So it wouldn't be when there were people around there. We were just looking to keep the vines from growing right back into that area. When you spray like Conestoga Road and Ithan Road,
That's not, so the township, 2 years ago, the state came in and sprayed the right-of-ways in there on state roads. And it was pretty brutal, because that was the worst it's looked in a long time. So the township, we do no spraying along our roads. We have a roadside mower, and that's what we do to cut back foliage, but we don't do that. That one year that the state did it, it was very evident.
it was just done on Conestoga Road last month.
And they got a lot of calls about that. Now, I mean, when it was done, it looked, it was a tough look throughout the township on all those state roads. I don't know if it's going to be that severe.
I think Cabrini did that too. Did Cabrini do that also on Eagle Road?
The portion of Eagle Road where Cabrini is a state road.
Oh,
So
I think they did it there too.
that could have been. So we, the township, we don't do any spraying on state roads. We don't use any pesticides of that type. We don't use non-selective herbicides.
Well, my feeling was when we get this Eagle Scout project going, we all go down and start hacking away down there, we can survey the problem better then. So we'll get whatever we get accomplished, we'll get accomplished. Whatever we don't get accomplished, we'll identify. John, is there any chance you could do a census of the trees in that area? I know you have a special app that you can go through an area, right, and annotate what trees are there and what size they are and all that?
Sure, inventory.
Yeah. So is there any chance you could coordinate an inventory of the trees there at the point, somewhere around the time we do this? And like I said, the idea of taking, my idea was to the big thick vines, the ones that are 3-4 inches thick, to just paint those vines. It's not like spraying a big area. You really just treat the severed vine. So there's not a lot of stuff breaking out into the environment. So I know they have products you could do that, right?
I guess what I'm saying is, I understand there's products, we're just not authorized to use them.
Right, okay.
There's a lot. So the only thing we can use right now are these natural products. Like I say, the one year was lemons, and now it smells like cloves. If we could use them, it's no problem. If the committee wants to use a non-selective herbicide or a vine herbicide, my suggestion is we need to go back to a couple boards and say, because this was a very, it was a powerful topic, and it was in front of a lot of boards and committees for quite some time. It was a few times at Board of Health, a few times through EAC,
Right.
Park and Rec, ultimately the Board of
Okay.
Commissioners.
All right, so
it's a,
we'll take a look at that separate. There's no hurry. It's like I said, it's not really related to the initial project. It's just trying to keep it from reoccurring immediately.
Steve, anything, sorry. Steve, anything you use in that area would be safe for the kids playing at those parks, correct?
right, so what we use now is, it's all plant-based, so it's all natural, and we used to use this one thing called Avenger, then we couldn't get it, so we used the one, and then, because it takes a little research to get something that is, that kills weeds that's not toxic. So it's changed a couple times over the years, but yeah, it is safe. And there's nothing that you want to drink or spray in your face ever, but it's safe. That's why we use it, and that's why our fertilizer.
None of these trees are where kids play. They're all way back into the, because most of the trees on the border of the park are already dead, and there's just vines and meadow.
We still have to abide by the township.
Yeah. Okay, so we do have a budget for that area.
So from a Parks and Rec point of view, Jack, we
Yeah.
don't have a budget from
Oh, I
that
thought we
area.
did. I thought you-
So this is how this works in Parks and Rec, and Steve, you can help clarify this for me, we have a 5-year capital plan for parks, that each park gets slotted, and then we review it as a board, which ultimately goes to the BOC. Am I right on that, Steve?
We're dead on.
Okay. We have, for lack of better words, a wish list for each park.
Right.
Each of us split out and stewardship each park and work on those wish lists. I happen to have Warren Philippone as my park designation for Parks and Rec, and this is on my wish list, is to address this vine issue.
Right.
In between our Shade Tree Commission meetings and our Parks and Rec meetings, we also have outside help, support, which is Radnor Conservancy. So between all of these, we're trying to get it accomplished and work on it. But there's no budget, there's no money that's put aside for that at this point. But we are asked for it. So
We've asked for it.
We're asking for
Because
it. So
Bob sent me an email saying that we had some money budgeted for this issue.
I'd have to check with the manager, so
Because of the stewardship, my understanding was that the submission that was made on the stewardship thing for Philippone Park addressed this issue and asked for,
But it's a slotted position on this 5-year capital plan, and it's a changing, moving document. And then every year, the budget is passed. So if there is money, it may not be specifically earmarked, but it's earmarked for our parks.
So what I can maybe expand on that, so we had a bond issue with very specific tasks for certain parks, Philippone, parking lot, tennis courts, Beau Connor, backstop, retaining wall, a restroom at the trailhead.
New signage.
Right,
yeah.
so those things are pretty specific. We have the Shade Tree Fund, which can be used for certain things, and then we have the parks maintenance account, if you will, that is used for some maintenance in the parks, and maintenance covers a lot of things. We also have money for tree removal. There's actually a line item for that. I'd have to ask the manager, Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure. I'm going to guess there's no line item that says, without the budget in front of me, vine removal, but there may be money slotted in amongst the operating accounts, because we couldn't use capital for this, right? This is going to be some type of operating account or a shade tree fund. So the way it works is when we do these things, we put in a requisition request, goes through a procedure of approvals, and we get a purchase order number back if it's approved. So really, it starts with what is the cost to do something like this, and then we can investigate, do we have X amount of dollars? And then there's a whole, under a certain amount the manager can approve, after that it goes to the Board of Commissioners. So there's a few moving parts. I probably make it sound much more complicated than it is. It's not. But if you get an idea of what some of the kind of cost is, that's something we can address.
So
well, that was part of my request from the beginning, was that they just at least get an estimate of what it would cost to remediate this area.
we're working on it, Jack. That's why we're having all these people.
I'm talking about what Steve just said, which is the first step. Well, so somebody's going to come out and do an estimate on that then?
Guys, I'll be in touch. Thank you.
So if we want an estimate, so my assumption is, John, maybe you can help me here. So if the goal, I know the goal is to remove all the vines in Beau Connor and Philippone parks. So we could bring a contractor in
Right.
and say, give us a budget price to do this work. And he or she could say, okay, it's X thousands of dollars.
Right.
Depending on what that is, if it's a large number, then most likely, and again, I'm just speaking for me, not the manager and the finance director. If it's a large number, most likely that would something we would have to request specifically in the budget. It would then become a project where we say, when we put together our budget and make requests, which we start in a short time, and one of the line items in parks would be, I'm going to make up a number for this exercise, $50,000 for vine removal and treatment in Beau Connor and Philippone parks.
Right.
And we go through budget here, goes to the finance director, the manager, we come to the board, and if the board ultimately approves that, then in 2018, we have a money slotted for this, it's approved, and then we would, let's say it's $50,000, then we would put out a sealed bid to get that work done. And it goes back to the board for approval.
Right.
It's a little convoluted process, but
Yeah.
we live it, so it's pretty easy for us.
And Jack, that is just one project. There are, Steve, I mean, could you even estimate how many things are on
Well,
Parks and
the
Rec? I mean, it's like a 10-page.
So we have the ones that have been approved, Itham Valley Park, Beau Connor Park, Philippone Park, the Trailhead, Emlyn Tunnel Restroom. So we have a bunch of approved projects, and then if you look at the Park Board spreadsheet, the Park and Rec Board spreadsheet Tammy shares with all of us, there is a very big wish list of items, and they're all pertinent. Some are not expensive, some are maintenance, some are pretty costly, but it's like any type of, for lack of a better term, infrastructure, any asset we own, it takes money to maintain.
Yeah. So the only thing I'm saying here is I'm a little fuzzy because I realize that there's, to some extent, there is, again, we're talking about definitions and clarity, that to some extent, this issue has been moved forward in parks regarding to stewardship. And I received an email from Bob. I should have known about the fact that there was budgeting slated for this. And I'm just saying what I got in the email. I'm still not quite clear on how is this issue moved. Now, you told me about what the steps you had to go through,
Yeah.
but are there any of those steps being initiated?
Now, as far as I know, Mr. Chairman, there is no money slotted for this. There is no money
Right,
budgeted
but
for
is
this.
there any initiative to get money slotted for that? Or to get it?
Well, the first step is to get a price, and I don't believe we've been authorized or moved to do so.
Right. So, I'm trying, let me go back just to a real basic thing here. These are our parks. These are shade trees in our parks. The shade trees are being totally wiped out in the center of these two parks. 60%, 50 to 60% of them are gone. 50 to 60% of the remaining are on the way out. These are our parks. We're the stewards of our parks. We are asking our community to support their shade trees and protect their shade trees. And we are letting these trees be totally decimated and wiped out in the middle of two of our gems of our park system. And I'm just trying to get some attention to that and some specifics on how we're addressing that. And nobody's said yet that this isn't the responsibility of our township to deal with, to face this elimination of these beautiful shade trees. And there's some nice trees in there, and many of them are gone. There's areas all around there which are just, you go out and look at it, there's a mound of vines where there were trees before. So I feel like I'm sort of working upstream here to get to why we can't get some attention to our own shade trees in our own park that are being eliminated. There won't be any trees there in 3 years.
It's funding, so there is no funding for that specific
But it's
issue.
attention too, isn't it?
Pardon me?
It's attention too, to the issue.
It is, and I think attention comes through these boards and Park and Rec. So if, not to reinvent the wheel, if Park and Recreation Board's working on it, then Tammy has a very good system that she does in there. And so at one point during the budget, they're going to come up with their list of things they'd like to see. And I'm assuming, after speaking to Claire, one of them is going to be vine eradication at these two parks. So to move forward on that, we get a budget price from a contractor who's good enough to give us an idea, but it doesn't really mean anything till we bid it. But that can become a request. Now, since it's already with Park and Rec, I would suggest we let that run its course through Park and Rec and their liaison, who's Tammy Cohen. And so we all work on different budget items. Now, for the Shade Tree Commission, when we come up with this price for all these things we're working, I'm your liaison, so I'm here to help you. I'll present to you, and then I'll take that to the manager and the board. So if we've already, just as a personal suggestion, if we've already got something rolling with Park and Rec and they're on it, maybe, and the chairman has been great at bringing attention to this issue here, maybe we let them stay with it so we're not duplicating efforts.
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm just not clear on what that initiative is in parks.
Right. So
Thank you, Steve. We are moving forward with attention to this want and need for our township, which comes in a lot of wants and needs. So nobody's arguing that those trees aren't shade trees and gorgeous, and we want to save them. And we're moving forward in Parks and Rec in terms of understanding and requesting for a bid or a estimate, and then go from there.
Okay.
So
Thank you. All right. We have the hazardous tree removal. Any questions on that? Okay, all in favor of hazardous tree removal report being approved? Okay, thank you. That should, any other issues? That should be it for tonight. Thank you, everybody. Meeting adjourned.